let's begin. At this time, I will outline the rules of engagement for tonight's forum. For the two candidates seeking the District 3 Public Service Commission seat, the following guidelines will be observed. The moderator will direct questions to each candidate in turn, ensuring equal speaking time. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and outline their campaign platform. Both candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question posed. If one candidate references the other during their response, the mentioned candidate will be allowed a 30-second rebuttal. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to deliver a closing and impactful statement. Thank you to our final 2 candidates for your participation, and best of luck throughout the forum. Next, the chair, Lucian Tansel, will explain the timing process and introduce our moderator for the evening.
Good evening. To help maintain fairness and keep the forum running smoothly, we will be using a visual timer for all candidate responses. Here's how the timing process will work. Both candidates will have 2 minutes to speak. A countdown timer will be visibly displayed on screen in the upper right-hand corner. Both candidates and the audience to follow. When time expires, a brief musical cue will signal the end of the response period. If a candidate continues speaking beyond their allotted time, the moderator or timer will mute the microphone to ensure fairness for all participants. Our goal is to facilitate a respectful, organized, and efficient discussion. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Phyllis Hendricks. She is a University of Alabama graduate with a BS in Industrial Engineering and a Master's in Project Management. She is the wife of Floyd Hendricks and the mother of Ryan Hendricks. Phyllis is a very active Democrat in the Fulton County community. Welcome, Phyllis Hendricks.
Good evening, candidates, and welcome to the South Region Public Service Commission Forum. The guidelines for tonight's discussions have already been outlined. So without further delay, let's begin. Each candidate will now have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. We will start with Peter Hubbard, followed by Keisha Waits.
Great, thank you very much. I very much appreciate every opportunity that we have to get together and talk about the Public Service Commission. So my name is Peter Hubbard, and I'm in this race, the Public Service Commission, because for the last 15 years, I've been developing my energy expertise, working with utilities to put together their power plants. How are they going to transition to clean energy? How are they going to retire their coal plants? How are they going to meet load growth? I've been putting together those plans, and then the last 6 years, I put together and formed a nonprofit and used that nonprofit to go before the Public Service Commission and argue that we could be doing more of this work to bring clean energy resources into Georgia, which will bring jobs and which will lower our power bills. And that, I think, is the greatest thing that I'd like you to take away from my candidacy, Peter Hubbard running for Public Service Commission, is that I'm ready to hit the ground running. I've looked at the Public Service Commission from every angle, and I see the ways that we can reduce our power bills and we can transition to clean energy and tackle climate change. All of those things are within our grasp, but we need to make sure that we have a commissioner who can hit the ground running and is ready to start as a commissioner right from the start. And I bring that 6 years of experience as well as 15 years of energy industry experience. So again, my name is Peter Hubbard, and I'm very happy to take your questions tonight. Thank you.
Go ahead, Keisha. You're
Thank you
next.
so much. Yes, thank you so much. And one, thank you to the host and for organizing the event tonight. I come to you as a former state legislator, as well as someone that has served in municipal office. I've repeated this for the last few weeks, and I'm happy to do it again, given the information that's been sent out today in a desperate attempt because my opponent obviously is not qualified. I come to you with the same qualifications that Chairman Jason Shaw, as well as Commissioner Bubba McDonough, individuals who have actually served in the Georgia legislature, which I think is the perfect breeding ground for leadership. I come to you as someone, as the only person in this race that has any legislative and policy experience. I don't come to you as someone that recently started showing up at the PSC meetings to give public comment and give a website. I don't put misinformation out. I don't tell lies about my opponent. I've spent 15 years serving in federal government. I am the only candidate remaining in this race that has actually ever had a job. I served with the Department of Homeland Security for a period of 10 years. I served with the United States Small Business Administration. So certainly if I were a crook and a liar, someone would have known something about that. But the reality is, when you don't have ideas, what you do is you make shit up. You distort the truth because you have no ideas. You have zero qualifications. And what's sad to me tonight is, for the last 8 weeks, we have remained in a way that was civil, but now we've turned into what you see in Washington. I am focused on the voters of Georgia, and I look forward to a healthy and robust conversation tonight. And thank you.
Thank you so much, candidates. So we're gonna jump right in. Thank you for your introductions. We're gonna jump into our first round of questions. First will be to Mr. Hubbard. How will you advocate for underserved or low-income communities in addressing energy access and utility costs?
Absolutely. So there are a whole host of things that we can be doing and that are being done, but not enough to address, in particular, seniors and low and moderate income customers who are disproportionately Black and brown, and also who disproportionately are affected by disconnections. They get their power shut off, and we're talking about 250,000 households each year. So what we can do is extend the benefits. There's a lot of extra ability to bring down the rates for those customers who are income qualified, who are on the low income heating and energy assistance program or on that senior assistance. There's a whole host of things that we can be doing, but that segment of the population, which is growing larger and larger, is just being ignored by the Public Service Commission. So really, one of the first things I'll do is look to those that are suffering disproportionately from the energy burden. That's our community of especially Black and brown folks. And we'll focus on those and make sure that they are seeing the relief first and seeing attention paid to them because really they're suffering disproportionately. And I do just want to take a moment to just address the fact that I am not a Johnny come lately, as was said. I've been down at the commission now for 6 years arguing for these resources, but the Public Service Commission isn't listening. And that's why I'm in this race, is to actually have a seat at the table and make the changes that we need to see. And I'm focused on the issues, and I think that's what's most important here tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Waits, what strategies would you support to modernize Georgia's energy grid while keeping rates stable?
Absolutely. Currently, we're in a situation where right now the taxpayers are picking up the tab as it relates to infrastructural improvements. We've seen that with the example of Plant Vogtle. And so I completely support an audit to which we're able to do an analysis of what rates are set at and what taxpayers are actually paying versus what the actual costs are for grid improvements. We've seen what happens in places like Puerto Rico, the level of instability in terms of how consumers are affected. We know that our friends in Texas right now are dealing with some of these things. And so what I'd like to see is community benefit agreements. And what that does is that ensures that there is an investment into the community, into infrastructure as it relates to what taxpayers are paying. And I think when you look at the $35 billion cost overrun as it relates to Plant Vogel, we have not seen that equity as it relates to consumers in terms of what we are spending.
Thank you. Thank you for that. The next question, Keisha, I want to come back to you, Ms. Waits. How should the PSC respond to the growing risks of climate change and extreme weather events affecting energy reliability?
Well, it's a great question. You know, right now at the federal level, we have seen an all-out assault on organizations such as the EPA in any efforts, as you will, to even address the fact that climate change is real. I think when you look at the dynamics that are occurring in Texas, it speaks to that particular dynamic. For that reason, I support environmental impact studies. We are very familiar with the dynamic that happened in Biolab as it relates to Conyers in terms of how we're impacted by the decisions that are made by corporations and businesses. And so I want to make sure that Georgia Power, as well as all the EMCs throughout the state of Georgia, are consumer friendly and that we're putting customers first.
Fantastic. Peter, this is for you, Mr. Hubbard. What steps would you take to make the PSC work more accessible, understandable, and accountable to everyday Georgians?
Right. I think that's been the really this whole campaign has been about educating people that there's an election, that there's a public service commission, that they do important work. So I think a lot of this will be making sure that I'm out visiting all 159 counties, even those that don't have necessarily Georgia Power Company or an electric membership corporation. I know that we can also, it's difficult to get out into the far reaches of Georgia, but it's also difficult for folks down south or in the Northeast or anywhere to get to Atlanta for the Public Service Commission meetings. So I think it's going to be inviting people in through the technology. We're all together here around a Zoom call, and we can do that at the commission more often and have these sessions of, you know, let's demystify a little bit this pretty complicated process of energy. Why is it that solar power and battery storage are going to bring down power prices? Why is it that staying addicted to fossil fuels are going to put upward pressure on your rates? You know, things like that help people to understand a little bit more of this complicated process. And so you know, I'm invested in that. I want people to see that there's real benefit here to taking the right steps, and we can lower our power bills. And here are the steps on how to do that. And I think I need everyone's help. And so it's really all about education. That's what I intend to do as a commissioner.
Ms. Waits, how will you advocate for underserved or low-income communities when addressing energy access and utility costs?
Thank you so much for the question. I think it's important to note that we're in 2025. I'm the only candidate, again, on record that has done this since 2012 as a member of the Georgia General Assembly, passing thousands of pieces of legislation that protect Georgia families. But specifically, we know that there is an all-out assault at the federal level to eradicate any federal funding that supports consumers in terms of energy assistance. So what I'd like to see versus the $296 million in incentives that have been given to data centers and these particular corporations coming to the state of Georgia, that we would put a fund together to support families that are seniors and that are low income, that also have health challenges that require energy assistance. I also think it's important that we have a tiered rate structure. And what that does is it protects consumers that may be having a hard time, but it also provides the funding necessary. You talked a lot about reliability for the grid. We need to modernize our grid. We need to be prepared as it relates to extreme weather.
Other particular communities also have extreme weather, but they're back up and running. So that involves, again, an environmental impact study, making sure that lines are buried underground if necessary, and also working with the community to provide the needed resources. And I'd like to see solar panels on libraries and hospitals and use of parking lots, things that you see in Germany and Finland that they're doing right now. So I want to be a partner with Georgia Power. I'm not anti-data, nor am I anti-tech. I have no problem with Georgia Power making a profit, but we should not do that off the backs of consumers.
Thank you. And Peter, finally, for this round of questioning, this is for you. How should the PSC respond to the growing risks of climate change and extreme weather events affecting energy reliability?
Yeah, great question. So the first step is if you're in a hole, stop digging. We need to stop emitting the things that are causing our climate to change, and that's CO2 and also the methane or natural gas is what they call it. And we can do that by building more of these low cost and reliable and sustainable resources like batteries and storage. So that's the very first thing that we can do. And that will also help to address some of these risks. But there's more than that. So, in this work, I mentioned putting together power plans. After 2017 and Hurricane Maria swept through Puerto Rico, I helped to put together the power plan. And what we did there was we divided the island into 8 different microgrids so that if a hurricane sweeps through and knocks a part of one of the island off, the rest of the island doesn't lose electricity as well. They're very smart ideas that we can be doing that don't cost a lot, that if we have the foresight and someone who has this deep knowledge like I do of power systems and how to put this together, that systems level thinking is what we do to drive down power prices, address reliability, increase reliability, in fact, beyond what we have now. I hear commercials all the time about the reliability of the grid, and yet my power goes out pretty frequently here in Atlanta. So we can increase the reliability of the grid we have by more of these low cost and sustainable and reliable resources like solar.
Thank you for that.
Madam Chair.
So next, yes, Keisha.
Yes, thank you for your indulgence. At the appropriate time, I'd like to have a moment to address the things that are in the chat. Mr. O'Toole, my former chief of staff that is now with Peter, has made the decision to attack me and use this platform. And so I don't have time to respond to these. So at the appropriate time, I think it's important that I address the things that he's put in the chat.
Yes, Ms. Waits. So you just fell right into what we were going to do. We did want to go and answer some of the questions. If you guys are ready to answer some of the questions from the chat, I'm going to toss it over to Dr. O. She's going to read some of those questions from the chat, and then we will proceed to our next round of questioning. We will lead us into some of the leadership questions. So Dr. O, can you please take over?
Thank you. Ms. Waits, as you see, there is a couple of comments in the chat from the name that you mentioned. The first part is let me go up. Did Keisha Waite forget that the city of Atlanta fined her $5,000 and is clawing back $25,000 that she spent of public money? The second part, like the taxpayer of Atlanta had to pay $1.7 million for the runoff election when Waits quit her Atlanta City Council position. Would you like to respond to those two before I go to the third?
Absolutely. So the first thing I want to respond to is the fact that it's been alleged on multiple occasions that I quit my job at the city of Atlanta. In the state of Georgia, you are required to step down to run for higher office. And so the reality is that I did not quit the job. Mr. Brandon Beach has now made the decision to move on and serve in the Trump administration. So let's be candid. We have had over a dozen special elections during that same year, and none of those individuals have been attacked. The newsletter that's in question, every single member of the city council is allowed to produce a newsletter that is paid for with city funding. And so that is what I actually did with city funding. Mr. Daniel O'Toole, my former disgruntled chief of staff, who is now Peter's campaign manager, made the decision to file an ethics complaint against me, which is now under appeal. And it's very interesting that he is choosing this particular forum to put this particular information out, because once again, Mr. Hubbard is completely unqualified. And so the goal is to be disrespectful, I believe, and also to put out misinformation. So that particular matter is under appeal. This particular newsletter was done during my tenure and approved by the Atlanta City Council for me to produce this particular document. So it's interesting that Daniel O'Toole, the very person who is printing and putting this information into the chat, is the same person that filed the ethics complaint, who was fired by me because he refused to come to work because he wanted to go and be a real estate agent. So that's really what this is about, is a feud between Daniel O'Toole and I. I hate Peter has involved himself with this person, but the reality is that's where we are tonight. But this does not help the 10.8 million Georgians who are struggling with their bills. This is why I came to have this conversation. But thank you again for this opportunity and indulgence.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question. Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, how do you expect to convince 4 Republicans to convert our current system to an energy-saving system? The GOP has made it plain that they do not believe in global warming. You have 2 minutes.
Great question. So, I mean, we're here to do the people's business, right? And so let's just make the assumption that I'm the nominee and then I will win in November and Dr. Johnson will win in District 2. So that'll be 2 Democrats on the Public Service Commission. That will leave Commissioner McDonald, who is approachable. He actually helped to kind of kick off a little bit of the solar that we have down south. And so, you know, I think I can convince him. Jason Shaw is the kind of commissioner that you can have a beer with. He is a good person, and I think that I can also convince him. I think the last commissioner, whose name I shall not mention, is beyond the pale and is not someone that is going to be easy to work with, but we're going to have that person, that commissioner, off the commission next year. So what we'll do is we'll convince the commissioners that this is in the interest of their constituents, of the people of Georgia, that they can do right by the people, and we can invite this business in. I can show them that we can have our cake and eat it too. And I'm not being facetious. I mean, there really is. We're using less than half of our grid. We can do more with what we have. And I'd like to show them that, and I think they'll be receptive to that. So that's how I intend to do this.
Thank you. Ms. Waits, the same question. How do you expect to convince 4 Republicans to convert our current system to an energy-saving system? The GOP has made it plain that they do not believe in global warming.
Well, I think that when you look at the actions that have taken place with this particular body and membership, and I'm referring to the existing 5-member Republican body of the PSC, you've seen some steps and measured, I believe, based upon the conversations that we're having in these Democratic debates. So those conversations are already happening. We must remember that it's Georgians, it's the consumers that drive these conversations. And so we get to choose our representation. And so it's my belief, given that I am the only candidate, once again, that has worked in a bipartisan environment with 179 other members from around the state of Georgia who do not look like me nor think like me, and many did not serve in the same party. As it relates to Bubba McDonough and Jason Shaw, I had the actual privilege of serving with each of them, and I'm extremely proud to say that I actually have a relationship, unlike my opponent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question for Mr. Hubbard. Even if the Democratic candidates in District 3 and District 2 secure the 2 seats up for election this year, the majority of the PSC will be the 3 Republican incumbents. How will you convince at least one of them to vote with you when you are in the minority?
For sure. I think I sort of started to answer this question with the last response and the last question. So again, I think that no matter who I'm talking to, that there's an argument that will resonate with them. And even the deepest, reddest conservative part of the state, they are going to respond to the fact that I can lower their power bills. And you know, a lot of them, they what they want to do is they like states' rights. Okay, they're going to they're going to come around to the idea that we should have solar because you should be able to farm the sun just as we farm the land in this state, because agriculture is the biggest business. So I think that there's a lot of different ways that we can show those other commissioners how, again, we can save money and we can invite new business and we can make this state more competitive compared to everyone around us. All of those things we can do. And I think that will convince them that, get on the train or it's going to leave the station, because that's the direction we're going in. That's the clean energy transition. And no matter what nonsense is happening at the federal level, solar and battery storage, those are the keys to the kingdoms. That's how we lower our power bills, and that train is not going to stop.
Thank you. Ms. Waits, you will have the same question.
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Yes, sure. Even in the Democratic candidates in District 3 and District 2 secure the 2 seats up for election this year, the majority of the PSC will be the 3 Republican incumbents. How will you convince at least one of them to vote with you when you are in the minority?
Great question. So, as a member, again, of the General Assembly in the minority, for a number of years, we were successful in passing legislation that I'm super proud of. We passed House Bill 54, which provides tuition to the children of fallen heroes and law enforcement officers. Many of you right now, when you hop on your cell phone, if you're in your car, you are required to use a device to help you to drive hands-free. That's legislation that Ron Mayo and I co-sponsored that was passed by Representative Carson, a Republican. Alan Powell was the number 2 signer on the legislation that I worked on in House Bill 54. So this is something that I've already done. I started my remarks by indicating that Bubba McDonough and Jason Shaw are 2 members that I've actually served with. So the reality is we all want the same thing, right? We all want to be able to flip the light switch on and make sure that power comes on. We all want clean air and water for our kids. We all want the same thing. But sometimes we fundamentally disagree. And that's where the consumers come in. That's where the ratepayers come in. And you guys get to have a say in this matter. And so I'm excited by giving these decisions back to the people. And I believe I'm frankly the only candidate that's not only qualified, but the only candidate with the real integrity to do it. Because I've already done it. I don't walk around talking about visiting the PSC, making public comments. Well, hell, if you've been making comments for 6 years, what have you got done? My bill is still going up. Isn't your bill going up? So I need some relief. And I believe that Peter is not the guy to deliver that.
Thank you. Thank you all both for maintaining a level of decorum. And I'm going to ask one more question before I pass it back to Ms. Hendricks. How much profit should Georgia Power receive on its investments? This is for Peter. Peter first, Ms. Keisha, and then it'll come back to you.
Yeah, yep.
Thank you.
So Georgia Power Company is a monopoly. They have very little to no competition, and yet what they enjoy is basically everything they build, even when they make mistakes and there's cost overruns, they earn 12%, almost 12% on that, sometimes even more, right? And there's very little investments where you can earn a guaranteed 12% no matter what kind of crazy plan you put out there. Vogtle, the most expensive power plant in the world, or these fossil gas plants we're building, right? So they earn a very healthy return on equity of 12%. Everything they build, they earn 12% on. And with that, Georgia Power earned about $2.5 billion in profit. Now, if that return on equity of 12% were adjusted down to what all other electric utilities earn, that is enough extra profit that we could return to everyone that pays a power bill to immediately lower your power bill by 20%. That's how much fat we're talking about. So there's a lot of things that we can do to where you can still have a healthy, profitable electric utility, but it doesn't have to be excess profit that is at our expense. And I'll also just add as well, it's not just that, there's many other ways. So these data centers, again, we want to welcome business into the state, but they're not paying any sales tax. They're paying very little property tax, and the electricity they're paying is 5 times less what you and I pay if you're a Georgia Power Company customer. So they're subsidizing these data centers and this new business on the backs of us. And so there's a lot of things we can do to provide that rate relief. We just need to have commissioners who know what they're doing and can start right from the start and have that expertise that I bring to the table.
Thank you. Miss Keisha, same question.
Thank
How
you.
much profit, you're welcome. How much profit should Georgia Power receive on its investment?
Thank you. I'm excited to answer the question. But my opponent keeps talking about expertise, and I'm flabbergasted because for 6 years he has made the decision to go down to the Public Service Commission and give public comment, and absolutely nothing has happened. In fact, our bills have skyrocketed and they're out of control. 11.9% is the current rate, but here's the reality. I support rolling back the surcharges on customer bills and forcing Georgia Power to absorb some of the costs. Accountability matters. There is no business in the world where you can have those types of massive overruns to the tune of $35 billion and you still draw a profit and you are rewarded. We must have a performance-based metrics, meaning when you perform, you are rewarded. Nobody has a problem with Georgia Power making a profit. The issue is Georgia Power has made a profit. They made it off the backs of everyday consumers, and we have bear the brunt of these skyrocketing utility bills, in addition to the fact that we're not taking care of those individuals who are seniors, working families, families who have healthcare challenges and related issues. So we also want to see a tiered rate system that protects consumers who are having to deal with these types of dynamics.
Thank you. Thank you, audience, for your questions. Keep them coming. At this time, I'm going to pass it back to Ms. Hendricks. Ms. Hendricks, you're muted. You're muted. You are muted.
I'm unmuting. Thank you, Yolanda. I know that I was, so I just unmuted myself. So thank you, audience. Thank you, candidates. The next round of questioning will be tailored towards the candidates' qualifications, priorities, and vision. So the first question is going to go to Ms. Keisha Waits. Can you share a concrete policy or incentive you would propose to accelerate renewable energy adoption in Georgia?
Great question. So right now, Georgia Power has a solar buyback program. The reason why consumers don't take advantage of it is because it's too costly and too expensive. We will never run out of enough sunlight. We will never run out of wind. And so I support measures that produce solar and wind, which is some of the things that you see other states moving toward. But unfortunately, because Georgia Power cannot make a profit off of that, that's not something that they push to consumers. So we need an educational program that provides consumers with the information, with the technology to assist those who want to move in a direction of solar power in their particular homes. Lastly, Germany, Finland have already moved in this direction where they're using empty parking lots to put solar panels on to power communities. We all know that data centers use the consumption of a small city and town. And so as it relates to water consumption, as it relates to power consumption, we know that these are things that we need to be prepared for. So versus putting up these nuclear reactor plants in all of these communities where these data centers are going to be built, we need to ensure that those facilities are bearing the cost and burden. And so for that reason, I support a rollback surcharge on all customer bills, forcing Georgia Power to absorb more of the cost and be accountable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hubbard, which current utility-related issue do you believe demands immediate PSC intervention and why?
It's hard to pick just one, but certainly rate relief, I think, has to be at the top of the list, right? So after these past couple of years, we've had 6 rate increases that have locked in on the average bill $60 more per month in the summertime. Everyone's starting to get their summer bills, and I don't think that they're going to be happy. So that's going to be the #1 issue. But I think a really close second is we can't make costly mistakes that we're going to be paying for many years and passing on to our children. So if we're building brand new fossil gas plants, we're going to have to pay the bill on that for decades. But we know we don't have that time. We know there's already cheaper resources. So I think an intervention is needed to stop digging in the hole that we're already in, and let's turn towards those lower cost resources. And I also just want to point out as well, with the bill that passed last Friday, that is going to raise power prices in Georgia and everywhere else. So there'll be an even greater incentive to be energy efficient and not use energy in the first place. And we can still have nice things, but we also can do things in a more efficient way. And that's going to be a way to lower bills. So there's a lot of things we can do, but I know that rate relief is the #1 issue. And right after that is not making costly mistakes that we'll pay for decades.
Thank you. Ms. Waits, what innovative solutions would you champion to close the service gap in rural and underserved communities?
Great question. I support cost benefit agreements. And an example of that is a business and or corporation putting solar panels on a hospital or a library or any public entity. And these are things that we do at the local level, at the state level. So these are things that we're very familiar with. But at the end of the day, when you come in, specifically given the number of discounts, and my colleague has already talked about the fact that data centers pay 40% below anywhere in the nation as it relates to Georgia. They're paying far less than you and I as it relates to being consumers and ratepayers. And so I support cost benefit agreements that when these entities come into small towns and rural communities, that they invest in broadband, that they invest in those various communities that may have these needs. And we do that by putting together a fund that takes care of seniors, families that may have health challenges, and individuals that may be struggling as it relates to their energy bills, natural gas bills, including water bills, to put this particular fund together to help sustain these communities that are having a hard time.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Coming back to you, Mr. Hubbard. How would you implement a more proactive accountability system for utility providers regarding service failures, rate hikes, or environmental harm?
That is a very broad question, and accountability just has to come, I think, from the public service commissioners themselves. You just have to have commissioners who have a moral compass, and who that compass is pointed towards service of the public and accountability. And that's what we don't have right now. And so I think it's going to be vital to have some of that, in the form of 2 Democrats on the commission, because there isn't a whole lot of oversight. There isn't a lot of accountability. If you listen to the commission, they say, well, accountability is by holding an election. This seat that we're looking at, District-3, held by the incumbent Fitz Johnson, has been held for 4 years without an election. So we don't have accountability through elections, or rarely. We don't have accountability from Republican commissioners when it comes to putting in a gas pipeline in Albany and the compressor station and pollution there, or Joliet, Georgia, where the coal ash is an issue, or many of the other coal ash sites that are in Black and brown communities and places that where we're seeing environmental impacts that go beyond. So that accountability just has to come, I think, from the commission. And I think by opening up and showing more with transparency, and transparency is incredibly vital. We do not have that right now, but by being transparent and showing how we can have a better future for Georgia, I think that is how we bring and hold ourselves accountable. And I think accountability and transparency is sorely missing, and that's what I intend to bring to this commission.
Thank you, Peter. Next question, Ms. Waits. Which current utility-related issue do you believe demands immediate PSC intervention, and why?
I'll use this question to answer a couple of things I've been asked, which is amazing. What are my qualifications and what pieces of legislation I've actually championed during my career as a legislator? And so the list is quite long, so I'll be a while. Right now, Vine City is dealing with an issue which I went and spoke to the PSC during public comment. I didn't see Peter, and they're putting a substation in a portion of the community that will not be served whatsoever by this particular substation. And we see this happen all the time all over Atlanta. We've seen examples where we put landfills in communities like District 12, areas that I have served for a number of years. We've seen Black and brown communities be impacted by these types of things. And so you have to be sensitive to that, but you also have to have had some experience in dealing with that. So Vine City, I think, is a community that needs immediate attention as it relates to this particular substation to ensure that the community where you're going to place assets, resources, and liabilities benefit from those decisions. How much time do I have left? I'd love to run down the legislation that I actually authored and passed. I don't think Mr. Hubbard has authored and passed any legislation whatsoever. And so I'd love to have that opportunity at the appropriate time tonight.
Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Hubbard. Can you share a concrete policy or incentive you would propose to accelerate renewable energy adoption in Georgia?
Absolutely. So I think I want to make very clear that through the nonprofit and using my deep experience in analysis, I've actually prepared a plan on how we can very reliably and sustainably and for lower cost transition Georgia's power grid from the coal and the gas that we have now to more sustainable resources. And that's all published on my nonprofit. That's the Georgia Center for Energy Solutions. So a couple of concrete things. I do talk about solar a lot, and that's a very important way. We need to we have a fair amount of solar, but the benefits aren't flowing through to us, the customers. And so we need to make sure that those benefits are actually being connected to the customers, and that is not happening right now. But I also know that we can do a lot of things related to, so the solar is one thing. The battery storage that helps us to use that extra solar during the day. We make hay while the sun is shining, and that allows us to avoid building some of the new power infrastructure that was just talked about, that Vine City substation. When we're smarter with the grid we have, we don't have to build new substations necessarily like that. So there's really creative and inventive things that we can do that are concrete beyond just the solar, the battery storage, and even that energy efficiency that I mentioned. Those are some of the very concrete things we can do right now to improve the economics of our grid and drive down people's power bills.
Thank you. So back to you, Ms. Waits. Same question that I asked Peter. How would you implement a more proactive accountability system for utility providers regarding service failures, rate hikes, or environmental harm?
Okay. So I've already talked about Plant Vogel in terms of the cost overruns. I think we need to give some of those fees and services surcharges back to consumers, given that there has been a massive failure as it relates to equity. I also think we need to modernize our grid so that it's able to handle extreme weather, such as what you see happening in Texas. My colleague has already talked about investing in battery storage, microgrids, localizing energy sources. We do that through wind, solar. I'll also push for mandatory storm preparedness, which nobody has talked about at all, and plans from utilities so that we'll have a faster response as it relates to power going down. A couple of weeks ago, we had several communities that were out of power for a number of days. And so that's unnecessary now. So we can ensure that families are not left in the dark for 3 to 5 days unnecessarily. We need to also talk about storm preparedness. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, back to you, Peter. What innovative solution would you champion to close the service gap in rural and underserved communities?
This is also an excellent question. So there's a few things, right? Those benefits, I just mentioned that the solar, and there's a lot of it in the South and the rural areas, those benefits are not flowing to the customers, in particular in rural areas, in the middle swath of Georgia. And so what we can do is make sure that those benefits are actually getting to those customers. And one of the ways that we can do that is right now, you pay 21 cents for your power. If you're a Georgia Power Company customer like me, I am. But if you have solar, you only get about 7.3 cents right now. So, I mean, just to give you a sense, there's a gentleman that reached out, has solar on his house. He's rural. $100 every month is what he pays. He only gets 15 off from his solar because those benefits are not flowing to him. So that's a very concrete thing that we can do is make sure that rural folks in particular can tap that sun, can farm that sun. They have the land, they can put it very cheaply. And those community benefit agreements, we have to be careful with those because, there actually has to be a real benefit to provide. So the benefit is to the grid and it drives down everyone's prices. There's some local benefit to that that often doesn't get captured. And there's only so much benefit there. So, we do have to be careful about where those benefits come from. Generally speaking, it's by lowering power prices, and I think that's the best way we can provide relief to rural folks, as well as giving them a fair shake for the energy they produce, the solar on their own land.
Well, thank you. I am going to give it back to Dr. Ogletree. We're going to answer a few more questions from the chat. Dr. Ogletree, it's over to you.
Thank you. This question is for Ms. Waits. Question from the chat. Please list with a brief explanation a few of the legislative bills you have introduced and were passed in the last year.
Thank you.
Ms. Waits.
Thank you for the question. And I'm also going to flip this back because I'm being asked a number of questions, and I think this is germane to this conversation. I also want to talk about the other folks who are endorsing me, which is in this chat. So a couple of things, and I started already with House Bill 54. This provides tuition assistance to the children of officers and first responders that have been killed in the line of duty. Alan Power was the #2 signer on the legislation, who is a staunch Republican. This passed during Speaker Ralston's tenure. I also was responsible for authoring and co-sponsoring hands-free driving, which many of you now know you should not be on your cell phones without a device to make it hands-free. Representative Carson passed that, another staunch Republican. Many people don't know that when you visit the state capitol right now today, in the elevators, there is braille and tactile signage. I was contacted in 2012 by an individual who had sight and hearing impaired issues, who told me that we don't have this, and this is something that should happen by law as it relates to individuals who may have hearing and seeing issues. And so we also have wheelchair ramp accessibility to the Coverdale Legislative Office building. For those of you who have been to the Capitol, I'm pretty sure Peter would know this, you had to take your wheelchair and go behind the building to get access to the building if you were a legislator who was serving across the street to get to your office. That was my legislation, Peter. And then lastly, Miriam's Law. Many of you remember recently a bartender was killed and murdered in Atlanta by a sex offender. And so we work with the General Assembly and with Fulton County to ensure that rapists and sexual predators are rated so that they're not out walking the street harming children and families. Lastly, Erica's Law. Many of you remember we were dealing with issues from street racing, drag racing, folks doing donuts and being out of control. In fact, the entire family was killed in the city of College Park because police officers were chasing them. So we passed Erica's Law, or proposed it. Well, anyway, as I said, this is fun. I'm having a great time.
Thank you. Peter, your name was called a couple of times. Would you like a rebuttal?
I guess what I can say is that there are a number of Ms. Waite's former colleagues. I have a number of endorsements. Senator Elena Parent, Senator Nan Orrock, Representative Jasmine Clark, Representative Syra Draper. There's a number of her colleagues that I think recognize, and I will also mention, I think the one I'm most proud of, I think, is also the former head of the Atlanta chapter of the NAACP, Mr. Richard Rose. So there's a number of folks that are standing behind this campaign because they recognize that we're doing good work and we're here for the right reasons, and we're here to do the people's work, which is to lower power bills and transition us to clean energy. So that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'd like to talk about tonight.
Thank you. This question is for you, Ms. Waits. How do you explain maintaining plans based on the Trump administration wanting support for climate change in research for weather? Let me get this question. How does either candidate explain maintaining plans based on the Trump admin wanting support for climate change in research for weather?
So I think it's important to use this as an opportunity to talk about the germaneness and what the Public Service Commission actually does. As a Public Service Commission, my goal is to be an advocate for consumers, and that's the first way that we drive down rates. As it relates to the federal government is what it is. My goal is to work with the state legislature and the General Assembly to provide resources to families who are interested in solar and wind. Right now, Georgia Power is not necessarily incentivized to do that because they don't make a profit from doing so. So distributed solar, such as rooftop panels, community solar, shifts power, and it saves consumers, and it also reduces the demand on power plants. So building large-scale solar also competes with that fossil fuel investment that utility companies have already made. So there's less incentives for them to bear and embrace solar unless the PSC requires them to do that. The PSC is an oversight agency. It is an administrative function. It is not my job to be an energy policy expert. It's my job to work and fight for communities, which I've already done. So, to say that for 6 years you've made public comment at the PSC when you have done nothing else, you've offered no legislation, you have offered no solutions to the problems, and then you talk about a website, I find that offensive to the 10.8 million Georgians who need our help.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hubbard, same question. Do I need to repeat it for you?
Yes, would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. How does either candidate explain maintaining plans based on the Trump admin wanting support for climate change in research for weather?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's a broad one. There's a lot of nonsense I said that's happening at the federal level, and that budget bill again is going to take away a lot of the wind in the sails and some of the benefits, the economic benefits of solar. So it will raise costs, okay? But that doesn't mean that we can't keep doing what we know needs to be done. So I think despite, and in fact, because of what's happening at the federal level, that just means that state level races like the Public Service Commission are incredibly important because we can keep moving the ball forward. We know which direction we need to move in. And so it's just incredibly important to do this work here and now at this level, at the state level. So regardless of what's happening at the federal level, the economics and this transition that we're on is moving in this direction. And I do think it is incredibly important. There is more than just oversight. We have to not be a reactive Public Service Commission. We have to be proactive. That is how we get there more quickly, more efficiently, and more reliably at lower cost. So I have that vision. I put it out there. It will take a dedicated energy expert to get the job done. That's what I intend to do.
Thank you. Ms. Waits, what 3 things should counties and municipalities highlight when negotiating contracts with data centers?
Great question. And I'd like to switch gears at the appropriate time and ask another question. So I've talked about cost benefit agreements, right? So when we have data centers or any entity that comes into a community, there should be an actual community benefit. So that's the first thing I think we need to start there. The second thing we need to do is we need to take the funding conversation out of the room. Right now, the PSC is a rubber stamp for Georgia Power, frankly, to the tune of $500,000 per member. Senate Bill 34, I think, would have done a great job in terms of reducing the data centers, but we also need to pass legislation that will prohibit commissioners rather, from taking any funding from these individuals. You cannot advocate for a community if they are in your pocket. So that's the second thing I think we need to do. And then lastly, pass Senate Bill 34, which will place a moratorium on data centers until we can come up with a rate system that creates equity in terms of what consumers pay and what businesses and corporations pay. I am not anti-tech. I am not anti-business. I have no issue with Georgia Power making a profit. However, when you look at the last 2 years and you look at the last 6 rate increases, it is apparent and clear to me that no one has been speaking up for the consumer, including my colleague who states that he's wrote some type of plan, which I have not seen any of it, nor has it been effective, because for the last 2 years, we have seen our bills continue to skyrocket. So we also have to have a member who has the expertise and the relationships to move us forward.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, same question. What 3 things should counties and municipalities highlight when negotiating contracts with data centers?
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit earlier. The data centers, what is happening is, again, here, the benefits, if they were actually paying taxes, then there would be benefit from when they're built. There's a sales tax. They're pretty expensive to build. But right now, again, Kemp last year vetoed the one attempt to actually raise that from 0% sales tax to anything other than 0%. So there's no benefit there from when they're built, except for the construction jobs while they're there. But those are temporary, right? Then there's long-term property tax benefits. But again, I mentioned many of those are being abated all the way down to 10% of the appraised value. So there's very little benefit there. I really think that's what counties need to be paying attention to, is those tax abatements are pretty large. And I understand we have to be competitive. But the other thing is that what we can be concentrating on is the power. The sweetheart deal that those power companies are getting, again, is 5 times less than what we are getting. They do need to be held to account. If we're gonna build that infrastructure, then they need to be held to account and make sure that they fulfill their contract for 10 years, what have you. And the last thing they have to be paying attention to, and this is where I think the systems level thinking I have is important, is the water use and the land use. That's very important, and that we've got great ideas about how we can site data centers next to a wastewater treatment plant. Treat that water halfway and then use that for the cooling instead of using fresh water. You pay less money to treat the wastewater. It's a win-win, and we've got a lot of really good solutions right like that, but we need people who know what they're doing, and that's what I bring. I want to be in those conversations and making sure that we're designing these things from the start to be as smart as possible.
Thank you. Ms. Ways, next question, what are either candidates going to deal lack of support for climate change from Trump admin so we don't have what happened with Texas to happen here?
Great question. I've already talked about the fact that we need to invest in storm preparedness. And in many ways, when you look at what happened as it relates to Hurricane Matthew and some other storms that have happened in the last few years, when you look at the downtime that consumers faced, we know that there needs to be a greater level of preparedness. But I also think that it's important that we go back and have another conversation as it relates to renewable energy, solar and wind. It's clean, it's abundant, it's increasingly affordable. It reduces pollution, it combats climate change, and it also creates local jobs. It improves energy independence, price stability. And again, sunlight and wind don't fluctuate in cost because there's always occurring. So as it relates to natural gas, investing in renewables long term would be a win for our economy, for our environment, as well as for public health. And so those are the things that I'm focused on as your next public service commissioner.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, same question. What are either candidate going to deal lack of support for climate change from Trump admin so we don't have what happened with Texas to happen here?
Yeah, I've got to say, we are still going to see some of the impacts of climate change. And Hurricane Helene came through the state late last year. That bill has not come due. It's already, I think, $860 million and climbing. So those costs, that's what we're not factoring into our analysis, and we're paying that cost. But insofar as, without the support of the federal government, we have to be a little bit more self-sufficient. We have to kind of forge our path and show what we can do to be more resilient and self-reliant. And so I mentioned Puerto Rico and how they stood themselves up and designed a plan that they're still working to put into place. It takes time. But that design, that's how we can build in more of that reliability and resiliency so that when we know it's not a question of if, but when a future hurricane comes through, if one part of the state is hit, it doesn't affect the entire state. We can build in that reliability and do it in a smarter way with a lot of the technologies that we're simply leaving on the table right now. And so, with that expertise, again, that I bring to the table, we can implement those low-cost solutions and have a more reliable grid despite the nonsense at the federal level.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask my last question, and it's probably a simple yes or no. Ms. Waits, are you a Georgia Power customer?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, are you a Georgia Power customer?
A long-suffering Georgia Power Company customer, yes.
Thank you. At this time, I'll send it back to Ms. Hendricks.
Thank you, Dr. Ogletree. Great questions from the chat. So, candidates, as we come to the close of this forum, we now invite each of you.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Yolanda.
Ms. Hendricks, we still can ask more questions. We have time.
Okay, great. So I do have a few more questions. So I know that there are two to hear all these questions. I can see it on your face, Ms. Waits and Peter. I see you guys are excited. So I'm going to give this over to you, Peter. How would you encourage responsible competition among utility providers without compromising reliability or service standards?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's an insightful one because we have to think about what power plants we're building and how they have different impacts, right? A nuclear power plant, can't really run as hard if it's 110 degrees out. And even a solar plant, if it's a little bit cloudy, it'll still produce energy, just not quite as much. So we have to work with other utilities, and especially, the utilities in Florida to the south. They have a lot of sunlight, and we can do a lot more sharing with our neighbors. That will increase the reliability of our entire grid because it's not going to be sunny everywhere. It's not going to be, there's different conditions. And so that sort of working together with our neighbors, that systems level thinking is very important for increasing that reliability of our grid. And that's something that I've done at a really all levels, working with the executives at utilities all the way down to the system planners and the down in the weeds. So you really have to have that expertise to be able to understand how to work with the system and increase the reliability by sharing, and the competition part as well. That part, what I think we really have to do there is, we have some competition again from other utilities, but it's more of the sharing is what I'm talking about. But the competition is by having more of these, we do these requests for proposals, right? Where we look what developers are trying to develop projects and we bring them in. They're not utilities, but they're other power plants trying to come on to the system. So there are ways we can increase the competition that drives down prices. We have a model where we don't have a whole lot of competition and we're really focused on a monopoly utility with regulation and oversight that we don't have. So we need a better mix of some of that competition to help drive down prices. That's a fine line to walk, but it is certainly needed.
Thank you, Peter. Ms. Waits, that question also for you. Let me read it for you once again. How would you encourage responsible competition among utility providers without compromising reliability or service standards?
So I think it's important to use this as an opportunity to, am I not muted? So I think this is important.
Yes, we can hear you.
My apologies to everyone. I think we should use this as an opportunity to get information out there. So there are some of us in the state of Georgia who have no other option but to use Georgia Power, right? Because they are a monopoly in certain parts of the state. Other areas use EMCs, smaller entities such as Snap and Shells, like my mom. But I think it's also important to note that natural gas actually has competition. So we would have to frankly restructure the entire Public Service Commission to really address that issue. But I want to close with this point. Even if you're not a Georgia Power customer, the Public Service Commission still impacts you. The PSC regulates telecommunications, it regulates natural gas, and even pipeline safety, not just electricity. So the policies that they approve shape Georgia's economy, it shapes our environment, it shapes our long-term industry strategy and stability. So everybody throughout the state of Georgia, all 10.8 million Georgians are impacted by the question that you just asked, the businesses, the schools, the renters, and homeowners alike.
Thank you. And I'm going to give you guys one more question because you're doing such a great job of informing. So the next question would be, and I'm going to give this to you, Peter, what new methods would you introduce to ensure greater public engagement and transparency in PSC decision making?
This really brings us back full circle to the very beginning of this conversation and how, the Public Service Commission is a challenging one in that it's complicated work, but incredibly important. And so, just hitting the road and getting out there and speaking to people has been a real joy of this campaign and just talking to them about the importance of this. And so I really think there's a ground campaign to get people involved and understand that there's a rhythm to this. And that's, I've participated in 4 of these integrated resource plans. That's when the Georgia Power presents their plan for what to build and retire. And that typically happens every 3 years. Last year, there was an emergency one. So we can get out there and explain and demystify some of these complicated things. That resource plan that's put forward then leads directly into a rate case every 3 years. Now that rate case has been suspended, I think, to the detriment of customers of Georgia Power Company. We don't have the chance to argue for lower rates as was promised. But I think that's how we demystify and get that information and get that engagement out there is what are these big ticket items that the PSC deals with? Why are they important and how does it impact your pocketbook?
Okay, Ms. Wait, same question to you. I will repeat the question. What new methods would you introduce to ensure greater public engagement and transparency in PSC decision making?
Great question. So I don't think it's something that we have to do that's new. I think that we have to look at what actually works. I support an audit completely. When Georgia Power is asking for a rate increase, I think that has to be justified in some way. I support Senate Bill 34, which will place a moratorium on data centers coming into communities until we can figure out an appropriate rate structure that provides equity to consumers. I support taking funding out of the process. Any member of the General Assembly, I see my former colleague, Mr. Paul, is on here, Bolster, who knows this, that you cannot take any funding while you're a member of the legislature when you're serving. And so that should be the same principle as it relates to public service commissioners. You can't possibly make any decisions when individuals are controlling the funding process. And so that should be illegal and unethical. And then lastly, community benefit agreements. We shouldn't have any entity coming into a community where there is no benefit. And I think you see that happening right now in Vine City.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, candidates. So as we are approaching the close of our forum.
Ms. Hendricks,
Yes,
we still can take some more questions. I'll give some from the chat, please.
go right ahead. We want to get as much, we want to use the time as wisely as possible. So go ahead, Dr. O.
Thank you. Ms. Waits, are any of your former colleagues endorsing you for this race? your candidacy for this race?
Yes. Well, the music started. It's going to take me some time to do that, and I'm going to put something out because this has come up. Senator Gail Davenport, who has served, I believe, for 20 years. She serves the Clayton County community as well as Henry County. Senator Donzella James, she serves the South Fulton community and goes over to Douglasville. Representative Dexter Sharper out of Valdosta, Georgia. Former Representative Winifred Dukes out of Albany, Georgia. Former Representative Craig Gordon out of Savannah, Georgia. I'm extremely proud to have his support. And there are a host of other individuals that I can name that will take some time. But I don't believe that endorsements from elected officials or former elected officials is what we should be seeking. I'm looking to the 10.8 million Georgians, which those elected officials are included in, who are needing help, who have been struggling for the last 2 years as it relates to any type of assistance. And so, although I am very pleased to have the support of my former colleagues, I'm very pleased to have those endorsements, which I will list and put some of those out on my social media and website. I think it's also important that we look to the consumer. That is who we should be focused on. And right now, clearly the PSC is focused on maintaining Georgia Power's profit margin, but nobody is looking out for the consumer who has bared the brunt of that. And I'm talking about seniors. I'm talking about working families, families who have health challenges, who require oxygen, who need energy all day and every day. And so those are the folks that I am focused on. The community in Vine City right now that is fighting to keep a substation out of their community, which has no benefit to that community whatsoever.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, same question. Are any of your former colleagues endorsing your candidacy for this race?
Well, yes. So there would have also been an election these past few years, and Patty Durand would have been one of those candidates, but that election was canceled. And so she's squarely behind me, I think, in this campaign, because she's also recognized that I've been putting in the work over the last 6 years. That's, again, the term of an entire public service commissioner term is 6 years. And so that's one person. I also, they're not former colleagues, but I think it's useful to know that the chairman of the Board of Commissioners of Fulton County, Rob Pitts, he's on my side. He's provided an endorsement. There's a whole host of people that I think are recognizing that this is a job that requires a focused, dedicated expert who really understands all of the tricky ways that the Public Service Commission rubber stamps and allows Georgia Power Company to ride roughshod over this. So, there's a lot of good support, I think, and wind in the sails behind this campaign. And I know that we can bring this over the finish line in November with the support we have.
Thank you. Ms. Waits, how will you ensure that utility budget billing programs are fair, transparent, and do not result in customers, especially low-income households, overpaying or being surprised by large settlement bills at the end of the cycle?
Well, the Public Service Commission originally was intended to be a consumer-friendly advocacy agency. And so I think we need to return it to its original intent. And frankly, it's supposed to hear disputes from customers who are dealing with water, natural gas, and electricity disputes. But frankly, we don't do that. As it relates to the public comment process, I believe that we need to make sure that we are hearing the concerns of everyday consumers. I've already talked a lot about what Vine City is facing right now. This is a situation and an example where a community is being taken advantage of, and the PSC's job is to be their spokesperson, is to be their advocate. But unfortunately, it's fallen on deaf ears. And so I think it's important for that reason to send a member to the PSC that not only has the experience, but has also done this in the past. My opponents talked a lot about expertise, but, from looking at the website, from looking at all of the information in the plan, I haven't seen anything that will address someone putting a substation in a community where there's absolutely no benefit. In fact, I've never heard my opponent talk about what's happening in Vine City, which is a tragedy as well.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, would you like to respond to that, or would you like to go directly to the question?
Well, I'll just address it real quickly, just so people know. Vine City, what that is right next to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in the historic neighborhood of Vine City, where I used to have my kid play soccer. They're proposing Georgia Power Company to put in a substation. That substation would squarely benefit the Gulch and Centennial Yards, and it won't have a benefit to Vine City. And that's an example of how we're not really paying attention to the people and what they need, and we're focused on the corporate profits and that side, and that's important. But it's, it's the people that we need to be paying attention to. Again, it's in the Public Service Commission's name. So having addressed that, if you don't mind just re-asking the question, I'll tackle it.
Thank you. How will you ensure that utility budget billing programs are fair, transparent, and do not result in customers, especially low-income household, overpaying or being surprised by large settlement bills at the end of the cycle?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We do try and do things like they average out your bill over the year so that you don't see those big surprises. The challenge with that is then you don't have that incentive to be a little bit more energy efficient, and you just don't see it in the day-to-day. I also think it's important the way the bills are structured right now, and this is important, right? We just had this rate case freeze. It just froze the base rates, which is 60% of your bill. But the other 40%, that can fluctuate. That has things like the cost of the fuel, the natural gas or fossil gas, and that could fluctuate. That could double. So you can still see surprises on your bill. You can, we're going to be paying, I mentioned that 860 million for Hurricane Helene. That bill is coming due. You can spread those costs out, but those bills are going to keep mounting. And so what I think we have to do truly is to claw back some of that extra profit and use it to provide that rate relief and that sort of leveling of what bills should look like, and work with those, especially those folks on fixed incomes and low and moderate income folks, so that they aren't surprised and they know what to expect. A lot of people are on the wrong tariff, they're on the wrong rate structure, and they don't know that there's a peak hour when your power price is going to be very expensive. So you've got to have that education, make sure people are on the right rates, and there's a lot of work to be done there for that.
Thank you. Ms. Waits, with regards to cost overruns, is it not true that facility designers and contractors could be held financially accountable by contract provisions? Should Georgia Power include such limits in its contracts with its contractors? Isn't this something the PSC could require?
Well, I started my conversation tonight by indicating that this is an oversight agency. And so for the most part, the agency is charged with writing the policy. And so those are decisions that we make as a body. But we've also talked about the fact that we have a group of conservative members that are currently getting most of their dictation and their charge from another entity in Georgia Power. And so I think it's important that we utilize those stipulated agreements. We utilize those cost benefit agreements to make those decisions. And as a new member, my goal is to come in and not only work with our colleagues, but also talk about to the consumer the importance of the consumer being engaged in public comment and demanding these things of our members from all around the state. We have 4 other members from around the state, and I'm very prayerful that Dr. Alicia will be successful in the November election. But the reality is that we still have another 3 members that we're going to have to work with. And so it's important to make sure that our consumers and ratepayers are informed, that they're educated, and that they're abreast of all of the changes that are happening. A lot of the things that happen on the PSC, the average consumer is not informed because many of these decisions are made behind closed doors, off camera, which our colleagues in the General Assembly know that happens very often. And so what I'm hoping is that we bring transparency to this process. I am hoping that we have individuals who have a history of standing up for consumers and championing Georgia families. And I believe I've done that for many years.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, with regard to cost overruns, is it not true that the facility designers and contractors could be held financially accountable by contract provisions? Shouldn't Georgia Power include such limits in its contracts with its contractors? Isn't this something the PSC could require?
Yeah, the PSC does have oversight over a lot of, not specifically over all of the subcontractors and things of Georgia Power, but they can hold their feet to the fire And by holding Georgia Power Company accountable, that's how we hold some of those contractors and subcontractors. The biggest one, how we hold them responsible. The biggest one that comes to mind is during the Vogtle expansion of units 3 and 4, Westinghouse, the nuclear provider of that technology, declared bankruptcy. And so that was a very convenient scapegoat to say, well, look, the cost overruns are because this contractor, declared bankruptcy. And so, we can't be held accountable. That's a very convenient scapegoat that the Public Service Commission has used. But I kid you not, they're talking to Westinghouse again, and they've talked about let's think about proposing some new nuclear units. So if we have the same commissioners and they're doing the same thing again, that's the definition, and expecting different results, that is the definition of insanity. So there is a lot that we can do to hold the feet to the Georgia Power Company and its contractors, their feet to the fire, so that if there are cost overruns, then there's accountability. And the same is true for these new large load customers like data centers. If we're going to build a new substation for them and they promise to be there for 12 years, then there needs to be a bond so that if they withdraw, then there's a clawback mechanism there so that we're not left holding the bag as consumers.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard and Ms. Waits, are you all in agreement if we had an additional 5 minutes added to the form because we allowed people to come in so we can make sure that all of your questions get answered?
Thank you, Dr. O, for the question. Mr. Hubbard, I'm certainly available until 9. I think it's important that we have some very, very serious conversations tonight about equity and qualifications. And frankly, I have yet to hear when I asked the question, what policy and legislation or anything that Mr. Hubbard has brought to this conversation. And I have not yet heard that tonight, other than a website and a plan. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. So I'm available until 9 if everyone is willing to spend a little time together.
Okay, Mr. Hubbard, would you like to answer that question?
Of course, it really just takes a moment to just go again to georgia-ces.org. That's the nonprofit. And so what I've proposed is an entire alternative integrated resource plan. How are we going to get to this solution of cleaner energy? And I've literally put that plan in place, presented that. It's very, very easy to find all of the videos of me presenting before the commission. Again, you have to have commissioners that actually listen to you, and that's why we haven't seen that change. But I certainly have that plan in place. And so it's very apparent. It only takes a moment, and you would see that there's been a lot of effort put forward. That's why there's so much momentum and support for this campaign, as we see that there's an energy expert who is ready to do the job.
Thank you. I have a question for Ms. Waits. Please clarify not rerunning for state legislator and leaving the council seat after winning that election. How can we know that you won't vacate this seat in the middle of a term and then the seat is appointed by a Republican governor?
Well, I'm on record tonight making a commitment to all of Georgia and all of the consumers, including everyone on this recorded line, that I intend to serve the full term. There were a number of unique circumstances. In the state of Georgia, we are required to step down if you make the decision to run for higher office. I think if you look at a number of other individuals, they've also taken that and made that decision. 2 of them are running for governor right now. One of them is serving in the Georgia General Assembly and has left twice. So this is not something unusual where an individual has to step down and run for and run for higher office. Other states don't require this. As it relates to the cost of an election, you and I both know when you look at this particular race, which has been counseled a number of times, there is no reason why we should have ran such a race in the middle of the election cycle versus tying it to another cycle. And so certainly there's been some political gerrymandering in place, but I am committed to serving the full term. I've indicated that before. I did step down from the city council seat to run for higher office, which, the law required me to step down. So it was never a matter of quitting that job. I want to also be on record tonight indicating that I served 3 terms in the Georgia House of Representatives. And so for that matter, I'm very comfortable with that. I've talked about the robust legislation that I offered and the work that I've done. I've also talked about the work that I've done on the Atlanta City Council. What has not been answered tonight, which I find odd, is I've asked the question multiple times, what policy, what legislation What incentive, what community work has Mr. Hubbard offered to the state of Georgia in the last 2 decades since he says he is a Democrat? I am just curious. I have not seen him on the union line. I have not seen him advocate for immigrants and minorities when we were trying to take driver's license as well as health benefits. When we were talking about reproductive justice, when we were at the Capitol fighting abortion bills, I never saw Mr. Hubbard's presence. I never saw him discuss anything as it related to Vine City. He's talked about a lot about a plan on the website, but the reality is that I have yet to see during this cycle anything that he has offered that's going to benefit fellow Georgians. And so I'm frankly disappointed that my reputation is under attack.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, would you like to respond to that?
I really think we should stay focused on the issues at hand. That is what we're here to talk about.
Thank you. Your question is, have you ran for office or held in office before in any capacity?
Yeah, I did in 2022, 3 years ago, I threw my hat into the ring for House District 90. That was a very localized, one that I could actually walk the neighborhoods. It was really enjoyable to get to know folks that way. And that was a crowded field. There were 5 candidates, and I did well, but ultimately that was Representative Syra Draper. That taught me a lot, but this is a whole different campaign. This is a statewide campaign. There's 8.4 million voters. And I've done my level best to get out and talk to as many as I can, but that's my background. It's mostly as a policy expert, as an energy expert. I did serve overseas with the Peace Corps for a couple of years, 2 years there. So there is public service in my background. I've done a lot of public health related volunteer work as well. So quite a bit.
Thank you. Ms. Waits, are you committed to fulfilling the full term and not leaving to pursue higher office if elected?
Thank you, Dr. O. Given that I just answered that question a few seconds ago, I'd love to, again, take this opportunity to talk about my qualifications and what I've actually specifically done. I've talked about the legislation, and so I will go on record a second time and talk about the fact that I fully intend to finish that term and that I'm very happy to serve the residents of Georgia, and I'm hoping that those relationships statewide will be beneficial. And I believe, frankly, that's why I led the race. With 46% of the vote. I believe that's why 57,000 voters trusted and chose to support me. It's interesting that my opponent is talking about taking the high road, but yet, 4 text messages went out in metropolitan Atlanta attacking my integrity and my reputation. I have been accused of taking funding, which is absolutely crazy because this is the first time I've heard about any of this. I've talked about my newsletter. And so, if we're going to take the high road and we're going to talk about the voters of Georgia, then certainly let's talk about our records and let's put them on the record. But I think when you attack someone when you have no ideas and no experience and no contribution to the process, that's generally what we do.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, are you committed to fulfilling the full term and not leaving to pursue higher office if elected?
100%. And you should know that this term is only 1 year term. We've been delayed. And so the 6-year term, we have to immediately start running again for a full 6-year term. This is not a 1-year job. It's going to take time to move in the direction we need to move. I will be moving at breakneck speed, but I know it's going to take some effort. It's more than a 1-year job. So I'm in it to win it. There's a job to be done, and I'm committed to it.
Thank you. Thank you, both candidates. And at this time, I'll send it back to Ms. Hendricks.
Thank you, Dr. Ogletree. Great discussions there. So we are very close to the close of this forum. We now invite each of you to deliver your closing statement. You will have 2 minutes to explain why you are the most qualified and well-prepared candidate for the Public Service Commission. This is your opportunity to reinforce your vision, highlight your experience, and make a lasting impression on the voters. Use your 2 minutes wisely and make a strong case for why the people of Georgia should play. We will begin with Ms. Keisha Waits, followed by Mr. Peter Hubbard.
Thank you so much to the individuals. I think we're up to around 70 individuals who've chosen to join us tonight. I thank you for that. I thank you for your investment of your time. I thank you to the organizers tonight for putting this opportunity together. Logistically and financially, running statewide is overwhelming. I thank you to all the candidates in this race who have ran for office and offered themselves, specifically Robert Jones, who did take the high road and chose to stay out of the process, which I have not seen. I've indicated for the last few weeks that I am the only person in this race who has a history of working and serving in the community. I'm the only person in this race remaining that has any legislative and/or policy experience, which is why the voters voted for me, I believe, to the tune of 57,000 votes at 46%. I have made the decision to not go on the attack and spend my limited resources attacking my opponent. I've made the decision to utilize my text messages and my social media to talk about positive things that will benefit the 10.8 million Georgians that I believe are hurting and that need our support. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about my track record and the work that I've done throughout the state of Georgia. I look forward to serving the community of Vine City and being an advocate on their behalf. I will not take any funding from entities that I will be charged with regulating and providing oversight. So I'm excited about that. I look forward to continuing to make that case. And it is my hope, regardless of who you support, that you will rally behind the nominee. I think we got to have a real conversation about November and who's electable and viable. I am the only candidate in this race that has signs out statewide, that has traveled all over the state of Georgia, that has a long stream of fellow colleagues that have supported me statewide. And so it is my hope to make that case. And I thank you again for the opportunity tonight.
And I'll go ahead and start. So again, my name is Peter Hubbard, and I'm asking your vote this week during early voting and then on July 15th, because this job is too important to go to anyone who is not laser focused on the issue of lowering power bills for people and then transitioning us to that cleaner energy future that we deserve, that our children deserve. And so what I bring to the table is this long history of serving the public, of arguing. It takes considerable effort to go before the Public Service Commission to put together a plan, a viable plan for how we can accomplish this vision that I'm putting forward of a cleaner and lower cost energy future for Georgia. So, this is what I'm bringing to the table, is this deep expertise, this 15 years of energy and industry experience that we need to get the job done. It's incredibly important, and I encourage you all to come out and vote and for this incredibly important Public Service Commission race. So thank you once again, Peter Hubbard, and I appreciate all your questions and time. And please feel free to reach out to me. It's 404-226-4448 if any questions were left unanswered.
Thank you to both candidates for thoughtfully addressing tough questions and for sharing your perspectives on the issues that matter most to Georgians. Now, the decision rests where it belongs, with voters. Be informed, be intentional, be present. Make your vote count. Vote. Dr. O, I'm handing it back to you for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Phyllis. As we conclude this evening's forum, I want to extend sincere thanks to both of our candidates for sharing their platforms and perspectives, to our engaged audience for your thoughtful participation, and to our outstanding communications director, Franklin Young, for his unwavering dedication and support. The voices and insights shared tonight help pave the way for informed decision-making and meaningful progress within our communities. Regardless of the outcome, what we have witnessed here is a shared commitment to public service and the future of Georgia. A vital part of that future includes advocating for fair and affordable utility rates, As we continue to push lower energy costs, we must also support policies that promote energy efficiency, responsible regulation, and consumer-first solutions that uplift every household. To both of our candidates, thank you for your courage to serve and your commitment to Georgia's future. We wish you the very best on your journey ahead. Before we close, a reminder to everyone, early voting is now underway and will continue through July 11th at the following 4 locations: the Customer Service Center, Mechanicsville Library, North Fulton Service Center, and South Fulton Service Center. All of this is in the chat with the addresses included. Make your voice heard, vote early, and encourage others to do the same. Election Day is July the 15th. This concludes the South Region Public Service Commission Candidate Forum. Thank you all and good night.